about the theory of change. I'm really happy to have so many people join us today, and we've heard over and over that this topic was interesting for you, so that's why we decided to have a full webinar about it today. I have prepared some slides, a presentation where we'll go through the content, and then afterwards we also have time for questions. So if you have any questions about the content, you can ask me at the end. For that, you can use the Q&A box at the bottom. So you have already discovered the chat, and this is for you to interact and to maybe ask technical questions to the team. But if you want to ask me questions, please use the Q&A box at the bottom. So then that way I can make sure that I can actually see the questions, because otherwise for me they will get lost in the chat because I can't really keep up with everyone there. But it's great that you are already introducing yourself, discussing, etc. You will get a link to the recording afterwards in the presentation. We have all your email addresses because you signed up for this webinar, so you do not have to write them again. You will get all the materials afterwards and a follow-up email with all the information that I talk about today. I think we should get started right now and get started right away, so we have enough time to talk about this important topic. I think I've covered all the housekeeping rules that are important. So I hope you can all see my screen right now. Today's topic is developing the theory of change and its importance for fundraising and your strategic planning process. So the objective of today's webinar is understand what theory of change means, its importance, and how it can actually aid in fundraising. So those are the things that I hope we can cover today, and that we can go through in today's presentation or today's webinar. My name is Eva Wieners. I think most of you know me. I'm doing most of our webinars. Maybe you already know me from the online courses if you have taken any of those. I'm from Germany, but I used to work and live in Nepal for 7 years, did my PhD there about sustainability of development projects. And I have been working in the field of fundraising and development for almost 15 years now. If you have any questions, any follow-up, you can get in touch with us. And yeah, I think from now we will jump right in. So what is the theory of change? We hear that quite a lot, that question. It's one of the most common questions that we get in the chat whenever we do webinars, especially about Logframe or anything connected to impact. What is the theory of change? Where should we put it? How should we do it, etc.? So that's why we're talking about this today. I've pulled up two definitions. One is the scientific definition, and the second one is a definition that I pulled from a report of an organization who actually developed their theory of change and kind of set that definition for themselves. So just for you to see how it can also look on a more practical level and what people make out of it. So the kind of scientific definition is it's a comprehensive description and illustration of how and why a desired change is expected to happen in a particular context. So basically it explains how you think you will achieve the impact that you want to achieve. So obviously for that to happen, you need to know what impact you want to have, and you need to know exactly what problem you want to solve. So there's a lot of input that you need to fill this concept with content. But basically that is what it is. And the second one is the definition that this organization that I found set for themselves to work with. And it says a theory of change is a visual diagram. It's a representation which shows how we believe our activities will lead to the outcomes and impact we want to achieve. So there you see, it's not always just the text. Oftentimes organizations develop a diagram or like a visual representation of the theory of change, because it informs so much of the work, and actually it informs all of the work that organizations do, or should at least do, because it makes sure that everything an organization does is streamlined and actually pays into the theory of change, pays into what you want to achieve with your organization. So those are two different definitions, but well, they're not too different. It's just the second one is more applied. And this is what you can do for your organization as well. You can find a way to define exactly what you want to achieve with your theory of change and what you want to describe with it. There's different kind of levels of theory of change. This is a representation from a scientific magazine that I pulled up because I think this is very helpful. All of these levels are theories of change, but the bottom one at the project or program level is also called theory of action or logical framework or intervention logic. So I'm often asked for the connection between the log frame or the intervention logic and the theory of change. And most of the times when people talk about theory of change, what they mean is the theory of change on the organizational level, or sometimes on the policy domain level. When they talk about the theory of change on a project or program level, they talk about the log frame, and they often use that word as well. It is very similar, but again, the level is different. And the techniques that we will talk about today are more appropriate for the theory of change on the organizational level, or maybe on the policy level. But looking at this, you have 4 different levels. There's one with the worldview theory of change. So those are often your personal beliefs and understanding of how change can happen and why change will happen. So what needs to happen for specific changes to manifest. And then there's the worldview theory of change on a broader level for social and political theories and development perspectives that inform our thinking. So those are very high level theories that inform how we think about things. Those are not the theory of change we're going to talk about today. The next level is the organizational theory of change. That one is the one that we're going to actually talk about today. It describes the vision, the mission, organizational values, strategic preferences, and the role of the organization in social change. So this is oftentimes what people refer to when they ask you for your theory of change. Obviously, if you write a project proposal and the donor asks for the theory of change for your project, they're interested in the log frame. But when you're asked for your theory of change in general, that's the organizational theory of change that they want to learn something about. So that is talking about everything your organization does. How do you think your organization will achieve the changes in society, in the world that it wants to achieve? Which activities, outputs, outcomes are necessary to actually achieve that impact that you want to achieve with your work as a whole? Not just one project, not just one program, but your organization as a whole. So on the bigger level. So that is what describes basically the mission statement of your organization, but more practical, with more levels of detail, so that you're actually really able to describe the steps, the activities, and to ensure that all your projects and all your programs actually pay into that theory of change and help you to achieve that impact that you want to achieve. That is really, really important. So those are basically the different levels. We are going to be talking about the organizational theory of change mostly today. Most of the things you can apply to the levels further down, but if you want to write a log frame, that's a little bit different still. We have some specific courses about that, some specific resources that you can consult. This is still going to be very helpful, I'm sure, but theory of change, we're talking about at the organizational level, at the higher level. What do you want to achieve with your organization? What's your mission? And how do you want to go about this? And what are the activities? What are the actions, the outputs and outcomes that are needed to achieve that? The key components of the theory of change, when you develop one, are the 5 kind of categories: the inputs, the activities, the outputs, outcomes, and the impact. And again, if you've worked in development for a while, if you've written proposals, you know these words from the log frame, because they're very, very similar, similar categories. But in these circumstances, they talk about the broader organizational level, not just the specific project or one specific project. To be able to define all these things, specifically the impact of the work you do, it is crucial that you know exactly what is the key underlying issue that you want to solve. What is the key problem that your organization wants to solve? And that sounds super simple, but it actually isn't, because oftentimes you're not sure, or if you ask around in your organization, you will find out that not everybody is 100% sure what the issue is that you want to solve. Is it poverty, or is it injustice? What is this thing that you're specifically working for? It's interesting when we run workshops on this, and I've read these results from other practitioners as well. When you start the workshop with splitting employees into groups and asking them to define the main issue that the organization wants to solve, sometimes they come up with different things, not completely different, but different levels. So some people might think, oh, we're working for gender equality, and so other people might think we're working for justice, which can reach to the same point, but they are different things. So it's important that your organization is sure which issue they are solving, they want to solve, what is the main goal of their work. So that is kind of the first step to this. We'll look at these 5 categories in a little bit more detail here. So the first step, the first thing is that you have inputs in your theory of change, or resources. So those are the things that you need to run your program. That results in activities. That's the second step. Having access to these resources, these inputs, allows you to carry out your activities as planned. Then you get to outputs. So what happens next? What is the result of your activity? Successfully completing your activities should result in delivering the intended product and or service. So those are the services that your organization offers in general. Then you get to outcomes, which is midterm. Achieving the planned activities and the outputs as intended will then lead to benefits for your participants, for your partners. That is what happens in the midterm. And then long term, systems or changes in organizations and communities or systems can occur. So that is the long-term impact that you probably want to achieve with your work. So those are kind of the 5 different categories. And it is crucial that they are logically connected. When you describe your theory of change, everything has to lead logically to the next thing. So the activities you do have to logically result in the outputs. The outputs have to result in the outcomes, and the outcomes have to result in the impact. Developing a theory of change is a great way to understand if your work is streamlined, and if actually every single project you do pays into what you claim your organization does. Sometimes we see organizations that have projects and programs that are very kind of cluttered all over the place. That often happens when you jump on opportunities, jump on calls for proposals without really considering if that project that you have to propose there is a perfect fit for your organization as well, if it fits within your theory of change. So then sometimes you have assumptions and projects and activities that are not going to lead to the impact that you want to have. They might still lead to a good impact. They might still have a positive impact, but it's not the impact that you want to have with your organization. And usually successful organizations are not trying to change everything, but they do have one specific goal, objective that they want to achieve, that they're working for, because that is what defines their values. That is what defines where they're coming from, the people that work for them, etc. So everything needs to be connected logically. The activities you do should lead to outputs, outcomes, and then the intended impact, and not just lead to something. So developing the theory of change and really going through all the steps makes sure that you understand if every single one of your activities actually leads to something that you want to achieve. Or maybe you have to open up your objectives and realize, oh, this is actually not the objective we want to work for. Actually, we want to work for something broader or for something different. Or you have to realize, oh, maybe this project, this activity doesn't fit within our work, and it's kind of an outlier and it doesn't really work for us. Realizing this is often the most important step. It doesn't mean that you have to cut projects or change a lot in the end, but realizing this and taking the theory of change as guidance for the future to ensure that your projects actually pay into your theory of change in the future will also ensure that you can get to your intended impact much better than if you're all over the place and don't really focus on what you want to achieve. So what are some of the other reasons that you need a theory of change? It helps you with strategic planning, obviously. You can plan better and make decisions better about which projects to implement, which strategies to follow. If you know exactly what are the things that you want to achieve, how do you want to achieve them, which activities will lead you to achieve them, that will define your roadmap, your work plan for the future, if everything is logically connected like that. It can also provide you with a framework for evaluating progress, because you know exactly what you want to do. If that is successful, you set indicators for that, and that is how you can not only measure project success, but also success of your entire organization. If you are planning long-term, want to evaluate your work mid or long-term. It also leads to stakeholder engagement. You will usually develop a theory of change with not just one or two people, but with the entire team. Maybe also bring in some other stakeholders that might have input, that might have some more knowledge or more interest in contributing to defining your goals or defining what you want to achieve and how you want to do it. It clearly communicates the change process to everyone involved as well, because you have to logically explain why we do this, and then this leads to this, and that's the result. So everybody is on board. And in the field of fundraising, obviously it helps you because you can clearly communicate what you want to do, how the project you're proposing in this specific circumstance feeds into your theory of change, helps you to achieve your mission or your objectives, and it demonstrates to funders that you're effective, that your NGO's work does have impact. It shows that you're thinking about how to measure these things and that you really want to be accountable, and that you really want to show your work and be transparent about it. So there's different ways how you can develop a theory of change. Here's one way that can be done. There's different ways to get to the information in the different categories, but this is one way to do it. So in here, the first step would be to identify long-term goals. Obviously, that is something that you need to do. That is identifying in the very first step what is the issue that you want to solve? And then in the second step, how do you want the situation to look like in the future? And that is your impact, obviously, because you take the issue, you change it into a positive, and you kind of fill it with life and fill it with the change you want to see for your target group, for society, for the world in general, whichever level you're working on. And then a good way to kind of identify how you can actually get there, because just knowing where you want to go and knowing how you get there are two different things, no? Is to do backwards mapping and to identify preconditions that need to be achieved for that impact to actually happen, to actually come into being. So that way, backwards mapping helps you to understand what you need to achieve by which point in time to actually then, if you go forward, get to the point of achieving the impact you want to achieve. Then connected to that, obviously, you need to identify interventions. So what do you actually want to do to achieve those milestones along the way and that impact? You develop indicators when you want to measure, when you want to find out if you are actually successful in achieving this impact at some point, or if you're making steps into the right direction. And often you want a text at the end, so then you would write a narrative out of this. As I said, many organizations choose to also represent this in a graphic, and I have two examples in the end of this presentation, but sometimes it's just going to be a narrative, a text that informs where you start, where you want to go, and how you want to get there, and what your logic is to actually get there. Who should develop the theory of change? It should definitely be a group activity. So if you develop the theory of change for your entire organization, ideally your entire organization should be in on that, because everybody will need to represent this, everybody will need to stand for it, will need to be able to defend it, and to work towards achieving it. So everybody needs to be on board with it, and having people, contribute to something and be involved in the process really helps to strengthen the ownership of strategies, of documents, of the theory of change amongst your teams. So having everybody in this room and contributing to it really helps that it's actually a theory of change that your entire organization stands for, and not something that just a couple of people developed and then told everyone, well, this is it and this is how I have to do it. And that everybody has like a buy-in, can contribute, but can also see themselves reflected in it. Obviously, that's sometimes a complicated process. There's in bigger organizations often a consultant coming in, leading these processes, because there's also a lot of interesting things that you can learn along the way and along the process. They are also parts where you have to define the values of an organization, and that is obviously going to inform your theory of change, but that is also something that you cannot do as the boss or the CEO of an organization or a company, because then you will just use your own values, your own idea of that organization. But if you bring people on board and do it together, then you can ensure that everybody had their words to share, that everybody was able to include what they wanted to see included. Obviously, your theory of change needs to be closely tied to your organizational strategy. It can be part of it, can be developed together, because it obviously should go into the same direction. Theory of change is a different way of framing it sometimes, but it is closely connected, and one should definitely inform the other. So going back to the steps needed, the first step is to identify long-term goals. what are your goals and what is your planned impact in the long term? Again, that goes back to this first question, what issue do you want to solve? And then how do you want the situation to look like in the end? Sometimes organizations are also not clear on that. How does a just world look like? What would gender equality look like? How is that represented in society, etc.? But making sure that everybody's on the same page here is the first step. Define what success looks like for you. How will the situation look like when you think, oh, well, we did our work, we actually achieved what we set out to achieve? Is that everybody has access to education, or everybody is educated, or everybody wants to go to school? If you work in education, what does success look like for you or for your organization? Define that. And define the long-term changes your NGO aims to achieve. So again, how should the situation be different in the future after your work? What do you want your impact to be? Those are things that contribute here and that you need to kind of specify and be very clear about. That's the first step, writing that down. Then you can do. That is one tool, a tool that I've actually find very useful. This is something that I have used quite a lot in my PhD to actually find out what people want to achieve and then how we can actually get there. Because when we define a change we want to see in society, that doesn't mean that it's easy to achieve that, or that we immediately know the steps we have to take. Sometimes it's very complicated, and especially if we want to achieve a change that is drastic, that is innovative, maybe something very new, actually thinking in a linear way, so thinking from the present to the future, can actually hinder us thinking in the new ways, in the innovative ways that might be required to achieve that new goal. But if we go backwards, we kind of detach ourselves from the structures that we usually think in. Because if we think the same way than we've always thought, maybe we will not come up with the solutions that will lead us to a better future, because the way we thought in the past has led us to today. So we have to do something at some point in some way to think in a different way, to come up with different solutions, because if we don't do that, we run the risk of doing the same that has been done in the past and that has not had the results that we want. That sounds maybe a little bit too complicated or too aloof for you, but if you try it on yourself, that's actually really helpful when you want to make drastic changes in your personal life or with your organization, when you want to achieve something really different. So this is one way. Obviously, you can also just, if you've done this work for a long time and had very good results, you already have a lot of data on how you can achieve things and the steps you have to take. So then maybe this tool is not necessary for you, but you can try it in your organization, and you will be surprised with the interesting results that can come up using this methodology. So you map a pathway to the change, but go kind of backwards, and you identify the necessary preconditions for your long-term goals to be achieved. So, for example, if your long-term goal is, let's say, every child goes to school, 100% of children can go to school in your community, then a precondition to that is probably that the economic situation in the village or the community you work in is so good that kids don't have to work. And another precondition would be that the roads are so good that kids can actually physically get to school. Another would be that school wear, like the uniform and the materials, the books, etc., is free so that everybody can come. So you can identify the preconditions to that, and then go one step back again towards the present. So if you want to supply school uniforms for free for everyone, what needs to happen for that? Maybe they need to be a bit cheaper. Maybe you need to find a different provider. You need to find sponsors, etc. So that kind of results in other preconditions that have to happen for your impact to also happen at some point. So you see, going like forward and backwards, you can find out what needs to happen to reach the future goal that you set for yourself. So all those preconditions that you identify need to be linked to your long-term goals, obviously, because they need to lead to that if you read this in linear fashion, so from the present to the future. You also need to define your assumptions, because for every kind of future planning, long-term planning, you always assume things. You always have assumptions. You know that word from the log frame as well. There also you need to include assumptions, because you always assume that usually you assume that the environment you operate in is going to stay stable. Sometimes you assume it's not going to stay stable. You assume that the climate will stay the same, or you assume it won't. But you have some assumptions that lead you to believe that the preconditions needed to achieve the long-term goals will actually happen if you do those things. But you need to understand your assumptions. You cannot just blindly think, oh, all of this will happen the way I'm planning it here in theory, in our team meeting in this building. You need to understand what are the other things that also need to happen. For example, you would assume that if you train teachers, that they don't immediately leave the school and look for a better job, but that they stay with your school. But then you need to think about, well, is that actually reasonable to assume that? And if not, what do we have to do to avoid them leaving? So this will always, like, thinking about all the assumptions you make will give you a broader perspective on the project, will help you to understand if you're planning in a way that can be implemented. And it will also help you to see more roadblocks, like when you go about implementing your project, etc. in the future. If you see that some of the assumptions that you took are actually not happening, then you know, oh, okay, we're going to run into problems here. So this is going to help you so really define your assumptions, understand what they are, how you came up with them, why you assume that this is going to happen, and yeah, and how you can actually work with them. Then the next step is to identify interventions. So what are the things, the activities that you are going to do to bring about that change? What do you think will actually achieve those preconditions that will then achieve your impact? Again, ensure that they are logically linked and interlinked. If you run projects that give out school lunches, for example, that doesn't necessarily immediately lead to better education outcome. It can, but there's some links missing as well. So always think through the whole thing. Is everything logically connected? Does every single activity lead to an outcome, or first to an output, then to an outcome? How are all these connections made, and is it logically connected? And think of all the kinds of activities that will actually lead to the outcomes, the preconditions that you need for your project to actually happen. Then if you want to measure the success of your theory of change, which is going to be a long-term project, not easy, you can also identify indicators for each step. And you're going to have quantitative and qualitative indicators. This is much more important when you look at the theory of change at the project level, obviously, because that often is used for evaluation of a project as well. It's the log frame that you all know. So here, obviously, you do need indicators, you do need values, specific objectives, etc. When you talk about the theory of change on the organizational level, often this is not what people spend most time on, but obviously you also want to be able to say after 10 years, okay, this is what we have achieved. This is how far we've gotten along on these indicators, to show donors, supporters, partners, that your work is actually contributing towards what you want to contribute to, whatever you have set for yourself, whatever you have defined for yourself. And then there's the last step. If you want to put it in the form of a narrative, of a text, of a document, you have to write the narrative, obviously. It needs to be clear, concise, not too long, not too many pages. Explain the logic, the rationale behind your theory of change. So again, every single step should be logically connected, and putting that in words obviously will describe how this all belongs together. And then you will get to the point where you actually have a document, a theory of change document that can help you convey your theory of change to partners, donors, but also employees, new employees that actually want to understand exactly why you're doing what you're doing. I have two examples here of theories of change by two organizations that chose a graphic representation as well, because it's important, like on your website, in any information materials, it's really nice if you have a graphic representation of your theory of change, and you can put it and immediately show how you think you're going to achieve the things you say you want to achieve. So on a very quick look, people can see where you want to go, how you want to get there, and what changes you would want to achieve with your organization in the future. So this is a really nice way of getting there, kind of, and of representing it. So here, this is for the charity CAST. It's a charity helping social impact organizations use digital for social good. So they said what they want to achieve. We work to accelerate their agency, presence, and influence in technologies that affect us all. This is what they want to achieve, or this is what they want to work for. They start with the activities, obviously. Our work is network building, digital capability programs, digital resources, tech consultancy, and training. This is what they do. So those are the activities. So then this leads to outputs. Things that happen because they do their activities. They provide organizations with resources. So then what happens next? That's the output. Social impact organizations develop the skills, relationships, knowledge, and confidence to apply digital ways of working. And then the next step is it becomes more open. So what do these people do with it? And also what do other agencies do with it? Then the change happens. This is the outcome, more or less, on a higher level, and starting with the impact. The change in society happens, or the change for the target group, in this example, social impact organizations, happens, because now they are able to influence change within and beyond their organizations and sector, because of all the activities that led to this outcome. And this outcome long-term will lead to the impact that they want to achieve with their work, and that is social impact organizations can better respond to the need of the communities they serve by applying the digital knowledge and skills to their services, strategy, and governance. So here you can see the logical kind of following of activities, output, outcome, impact that this organization wants to achieve. And this describes their theory of change. The impact is the change they want to achieve, and the other points are the theory that they want to follow to actually achieve that change. There's different theories, different ways of achieving that impact, but this is theirs, and this is the one that they actually defined in group discussions, etc. I have another example, which is also resulted in a graphic representation. Again, it can be very helpful. This is what you find when you go to their websites. This is one of the first things you see when you click on it. This is an organization from the UK, grant makers concerned with immigrants and refugees. And you can also see that first they defined to be able to define their theory of change and work on it, they started by defining their values and their guiding principles. So they identified 5 of them: love, solidarity, dignity, power, and abundance. And actually, in this case, they have a really interesting case study of the consultant who did this with them. So describing the entire workshop, describing every single step along the way, which is very, very interesting to read how they did it and how people responded, and how people actually worked with them. So here as well, they start with the problem statement. What do they think is the main problem they want to solve? Racial capitalism and militarism inflict harm upon people and communities who seek to stay, to move freely, to work, to transform, and to thrive. So they work with refugees. That is the problem they want to solve. So they're using different strategies, which result in different activities, which they have not necessarily pointed out here. They didn't list up all their activities, but they describe their strategies, which is how they want to achieve something. And this leads to outcomes, so midterm changes. And the impact, they didn't even specify their long-term impact on this slide, but the impact they want to have is solving the problem they set themselves in the beginning. But again, this describes the way that they think they can come to the solution of the identified problem. It was done in different workshops with different team members over a period of time, introducing all these tools, etc. And for this organization, it was a very fruitful process because it also helped more people in this organization understand what they want to achieve, and what their organization stands for, because that's what it basically is. This describes the DNA of an organization. So how can you apply this to fundraising now? I hope that with the information today, you understand the steps that you have to take a little bit more to develop a theory of change for your organization, and what it is. And now, if you want to think about how you can apply this or use this for fundraising purposes, well, it's I think very obvious that by having a good theory of change, having a cohesive theory of change that is logically connected, that every project, every activity you do pays into, demonstrates credibility and effectiveness, because it shows that you understand the problem thoroughly and that everything you do will kind of pay into achieving the goal that you want to achieve. It shows a clear pathway to impact, because when you line it out that way, then every donor, everyone who's interested in supporting you, will understand exactly how you want to get to that impact. Sometimes when you go and check websites of NGOs, of organizations, they always claim a lot of the impact that they want to have. They want to solve big issues, influence many people, big groups of people, but you never see how. What do they actually want to do besides this one single project? But how does it all fit together? What's the overall picture, the strategy, the missions that they want to achieve? And the theory of change obviously shows the pathway, and shows the steps that you want to take. And the more concrete knowledge you can offer, the more concrete things you can tell people of how you want to achieve something, the easier it is to convince them that, yeah, you actually know what you're doing, and that whatever steps they can take are going to lead them somewhere. And obviously, it also provides evidence that you plan thoughtfully, that you're willing to evaluate your programs, that you are experts for the areas you work in, that you are an expert for the things that you propose. When you directly communicate with funders, you can obviously also use your theory of change to be able to communicate. You should then try to tailor your theory of change to different funders to a degree. Obviously, your theory of change will not change depending on the donor you talk to, but you can look at it from a different perspective maybe, and highlight different parts of it. Use data and success stories from past projects that have paid into your theory of change, and be transparent about challenges and how you plan to address them. This is maybe more specific when you talk about projects, because if you have issues there, it's always better to address them, but also on the level of theory of change for the organization. Obviously, if after 5 years you realize, okay, the way we thought this works is not actually the way it actually works, so we have to make some adjustments. Communicating that directly is also interesting and can lead to people trusting you more, and can lead to a much better relationship to donors. Some of the common challenges are, for example, if the theory of change is not adaptable, because again, it needs to be reviewed, it needs to be to some degree flexible, not necessarily flexible to donors' demands, but to changing circumstances. Like if your assumptions turn out to be all wrong, then obviously you have to adjust your theory of change. If you realize that some of the preconditions are not logically connected to the impact, you have to change them, obviously. Or if you realize some of your activities do not lead to the desired outcomes, you have to change it. And if it's too static, and if you're not able to change anything, well, then that is going to be an issue, especially when you work in volatile environments. Like we've all seen that with COVID, when things changed so quickly and so suddenly that we all had to adjust somehow. And then obviously you also have to adjust your theory of change to some degree because circumstances changed. When your theory of change is not accepted or known throughout the organization, that is also a problem, because obviously everything you do should pay into your theory of change. Everything kind of should be streamlined. Well, it not always 100% direct, but to some degree it has to lead to something that will then contribute to your theory of change or to achieving your theory of change. And if people don't accept it and don't believe that the way you have defined is the right way or a working way, or if they don't even know about it, then obviously some of your teams or some of your team members or your employees, your staff will maybe work maybe even against it or without knowing it. No? So that's why it's so important to, if possible, get everyone on board, make sure that everybody is aligned with it, agrees with it, and knows the theory of change that you want to follow. And then obviously, if not all projects are and activities are streamlined to the theory of change. So if you have a couple of things that do not at all pay into your theory of change, a couple of times that might be fine, but if that happens a lot, then you will get an organization that doesn't have direction, that kind of goes where the money goes. And those organizations tend to not have good long-term impact. They tend to not reach their long-term goals because, it's tricky, obviously, if you don't have a direction, and if you don't have one specifically formulated goal, then you're not going to achieve anything. If you don't, it's like walking around without a map and without knowing where you want to go, then you cannot reach anywhere if you have no objective to get somewhere. So it's always better if most of your project and activities are directly connected, because then you can all kind of spearhead to that one thing you want to achieve and make sure that your entire organization gets there. Yeah, with this, we come to the end of the presentation. I see there's a couple of questions as well. I just wanted to let you know about one of our courses that is closely connected to the theory of change, which is the course about logical frameworks, log frames. If you want to learn more about developing indicators, developing the logical framework in the first place, analyzing your environment, assumptions, risks, all of that, this course is amazing. It's done with one of our colleagues who has a lot of experience in this field. Usually we sell it at 200, but today, because you all took part in this webinar, we're going to offer it at $100 only. So I'm sure my team is, yeah, they just posted the link in the comments. So if you're interested in this course at this price, then please click the link in the chat and it will immediately take you there, and you can take advantage of this offer. It's really, really helpful. We also have many other courses that could be very, very interesting for you. For example, online fundraising, how to raise funds from USAID, but also more general ones like donor research, donor networking, stuff like that. You can go to philanthropia.org and check all of our online courses. And we also have a coupon for you that gets you 35% off of all those courses. And it is the coupon code fundraise. So with that code, you can get 35% off of any course you find on philanthropia.org. There's also ebooks that you can get about proposal writing, etc. We have tons of great resources. And yeah, if you see anything there, don't forget to use the code fundraise. We also have a donor database for donor research. It's called donordatabase.org. We have more than 5,000 donor profiles available there, so you can easily find potential donors for your project. If you want to do so, you can sign up and use it a week for free. And then if you realize that this is helpful for you, you want to use it in the future, I think a subscription is $99 per year. So a very, very reasonable price for the services we can offer there. So please check donordatabase.org if you want or need some help with donor research. Yeah, and with this, we have time for questions. So I will stop this and see the questions. The first one is, how often should an organization update their theory of change? What would tell an organization that they should consider updating it? I think looking at it makes sense every, depending a little bit on the circumstances, 3 to 5 years, definitely. And then if there's any changes in the kind of outside world, something unexpected like COVID, obviously, then you have to look at the things. If some of the main assumptions that you made are presenting to be wrong, then obviously you have to adjust it. If you cannot reach some of the milestones that you set for yourself, then maybe go back and take another look at your theory of change and check if it made sense. But now I'm talking about the theory of change on the organizational level. On the project level, usually you develop one when you submit, and then it's used for evaluation and monitoring in the end. But on the organizational level, I think I would regularly look at the indicators, at milestones, and at assumptions, and that would tell me if it needs to be revised or if it's still working. And then every 3 to 5 years latest, I would look at it anyways. And then there's a question about the distinction between activities and outputs. Yeah, that is not, it's simple, but at the same time, it's not simple. So an activity are the things that your project does, the services that you offer, the products that you, the services that you offer or the products that you distribute, the goods that you distribute, etc. The things you do. And then the output would be the result of that, the immediate result of that, which is not just service delivered, but a tiny little bit more. So when you deliver a training, for example, the activity would be training conduct. You conduct a training. Then the output would be the training was conducted, yes, but also people attended the training and people engaged with the training, something like that. It's a bit difficult to find indicators for that further than just people showed up. But it can be things like people liked the training, people rated the training with 5 stars, people said that they would recommend the training to their peers, something like that. That's the main difference. But if you want to learn more about this, there's also a lot more information about this in the course that I have mentioned that could be very helpful here. Next question is that at the program level, theory of change and log frame the same? I would say yes, but the log frame is a little bit more technical, obviously. The log frame has some more information, has information about milestones, has values for the indicators, has a current value, has target value, etc. So the log frame is completely based on the theory of change because it describes the same logic, but it has some more information than just the theory of change that is often descriptive to some degree. Preconditions would be, so next question is, could you share some examples of preconditions? Well, that depends a lot on your project, obviously, but it's things like if your intended impact is that young people have access to the labor market, the precondition to that would be young people finish high school, I would think, or there's more jobs, like businesses offer jobs for young people, stuff like that. So the things that need to happen so that your intended impact can happen, in that logic, that's the outcome. So the midterm changes. But well, preconditions are then also output because you have to go the step before that as well. But to start with, so what are the things that need to fall into place for your intended impact to also fall into place? Can a theory of change be applied in PhD research? Oh, I'm sure, but it depends a lot on the research you're doing. I can't really say it like this. It's a little bit like describing your thesis, I think, but it depends a lot on the research you're doing. And there's a question, the principle of theory of change. I don't really understand that question, sorry. Again, the difference between the theory of change and a log frame. A log frame is on the project level. It's very, very specific. It has more information. It's usually in the form of a table only. It can have a narrative, but not that much. It has more specific information about data. Objectives need to be smart always. And the theory of change usually is at the organizational level, so it's a bit broader. It's more in the form of a narrative. It describes the way without that level of indicators, that level of specificity, because it's long term. It's way more long term than a project. So that's the main difference. The presentation will be sent out. And what is the difference between a theory of change and a strategic plan? A strategic plan usually also includes other steps as well. Like a strategic plan will then also include the theory of change just describes how you want to get to a specific goal, kind of. What do you think is the method, the narrative, the thing that will get you to where you want to get? And the strategic plan then has all the other information. What do you need for that? How many resources? How many people? Which kind of training? What are your staff needs? What are the time frames for that, etc. So the strategic plan has way more information on the whole level of your organization. It has more background, etc. It kind of gives way more meat to it, but it should be based on the theory of change because they should want the same thing, obviously. But the strategic plan will have way more information around it. Impact and goals are interchangeable. No, not really. There's specific vocabulary when you talk about in proposal writing. A goal is something you want to achieve in general language usage. And maybe today I've used it a couple of times that way. But when you talk about proposal writing, a goal is a very, very specific thing that you want to achieve that is usually your outcome, so mid-level. So the goal is connected to the outcome, and objective is connected to the output, more specific, more short-term. If you want to learn more about this vocabulary and the specific meanings, we have a resource guide that explains exactly the meaning of every, like, what is a specific objective, what's an objective, what's a goal, what's a specific goal, etc. It's the resource guide on proposal writing. I think it's on sale for $9.99 at the moment. So if you want to learn more about this, that's also a great opportunity. That's log frame versus theory of change. I think I've covered that. How long should the impact be expected to be seen? Um, that depends a lot on the time frame you set for yourself. Usually impact is very long term, like 10 years, 20 years. Often it's that because you contribute towards a bigger goal, but that depends a little bit as well on if you plan that your organization should only exist for 5 years because you're sure that by then, if you start an organization just to build a school and you don't want to do anything beyond that school, then your impact will be, we built that school. And then that's the kind of horizon you work with. But usually organizations are set up for a longer term horizon. So then you would also look for longer term impacts. Stakeholder mapping. Oh my God, there's so many ways to do that. I think I spent 3 months alone for stakeholder mapping when I did my PhD. That is too much of a different topic. Maybe you can Google a couple of methods that I think are good. I think I used a social connections model, which was just asking almost everyone in the community who they think is most important and who are important stakeholders, and then mapping that out with the connections. That was very interesting to get a very good picture of the community I was working in, but there's tons of different methods. How many times it should be changed, I've covered that. Does that mean the theory of change section in the proposal template should be the one for the organization? I can't really answer that because it's different in every single proposal. I would think many times not. Many times I think when they ask for theory of change, they mean something like a log frame, but it depends a lot. So when you're not sure here, ask the donor, ask them what level theory of change do you mean here? That's a good way to start a conversation, and that is a good question to ask and a good conversation starter, because sometimes it's not that clear and then you have to ask. Okay, thank you so much. We're already 5 minutes over. That was a very interesting session. I hope you were also able to take away something for yourself. If you want to give us any feedback, if you want to write us, if you like this, if this was interesting and useful for you, please do so at info@philanthropia.org. And I hope to see you in one of our next webinars again. I think we'll do the next one in 2 weeks. And yeah, for now, I just want to wish you all a good afternoon, a good rest of the week, and see you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.